The bell after dark. The bus let me off at the edge of the valley just after 9. The driver didn't say goodbye. He pulled the lever, the doors hissed shut, and the red taillights disappeared into the fog before I'd even picked up my bag. I stood there for a moment, listening. The air smelled like wet stone and pine smoke. Cold enough to sting my throat, the kind of cold that lives in mountains even in early autumn. I used to know this smell the way I knew my own name. Now it felt like something I'd read about in a book I didn't finish. The road into the village was narrow and unpaved. Gravel crunched under my shoes. On both sides the fog pressed close, thick and silent. It didn't move like normal fog. It sat heavy between the trees, between the houses, like it had been there all day and planned to stay all night. I passed the first few buildings without seeing anyone. Wooden walls, tiled roofs, windows shuttered tight. A few had lanterns lit inside, but the glow didn't reach the street. Everything felt smaller than I remembered, closer together, like the mountain had been squeezing the village inward while I was gone. My grandmother's house was near the center, just past the old well. I didn't plan to stop anywhere else tonight, just get inside, sleep, deal with the rest in the morning. But then I heard it. A single note, deep and hollow, rolling down from somewhere above. The temple bell. I stopped walking. The sound hung in the air longer than it should have. It didn't fade, it stretched, pulling at the edges of the silence until the silence gave way. My chest tightened. I hadn't heard that bell in 15 years, but my body remembered it, the weight of it, the way it used to make my ribs hum when I was small. The bell wasn't supposed to ring at night, not after sunset, not ever. I looked up toward the mountain, but I couldn't see the temple through the fog, just the dark outline of trees and stone, everything blurred into one massive shadow. The bell tower was up there somewhere, past the shrine gate, past the old cemetery. I used to climb that path with my cousins in the summer. We'd dare each other to touch the bell, but none of us ever did. I started walking again, faster now. A door opened to my left. I glanced over and saw an old woman step onto her porch. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at anything. She just bowed, slowly, carefully, facing the direction of the temple. Her hands pressed together, her lips moved, but no sound came out. Then she went back inside and shut the door. I kept going. The street curved past a row of low houses. No lights, no voices. A dog had been barking earlier, somewhere near the well, but it wasn't barking anymore. Everything had gone quiet. Not peaceful quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when people are holding their breath. I reached my grandmother's gate and stopped. The bell rang again, closer this time, louder. The note split the air like a crack in glass. My hand froze on the gate latch. I could feel it in my teeth, in my spine. The sound didn't come from the mountain anymore. It came from everywhere, from the fog, from the ground beneath my feet. I turned around. The street behind me was empty, no one there, no movement. But the fog had changed. It was thicker now, pressing inward from both sides, curling around the edges of the houses like fingers. I tried to breathe. My grandmother used to tell me stories about the bell, about why it didn't ring at night. She said it wasn't just a bell, it was a boundary, a marker, something that kept the mountain and the village separate. She said the monks who built the temple knew this. They knew the mountain had its own rules, its own time. The bell was meant to remind it where one world ended and another began. But if the bell rang after dark, she said, it meant the mountain was listening, and if it rang twice, it meant the mountain was answering. I pushed open the gate and stepped into the yard. The house was dark. My grandmother had been dead for 3 months. That's why I was here to sort through her things, to decide what to keep, what to sell, what to let go. I hadn't wanted to come back. I'd left this place behind for a reason. But the bell rang a 3rd time, and this time I felt it in my chest. Not just the sound, the weight behind it, the pull. I looked up at the mountain. The fog shifted, just a little, and I saw something I hadn't seen before. A faint glow near the top, soft, pale, like candlelight behind paper. It wasn't the temple. The temple didn't have windows that faced the village. The glow moved. I stepped back. The mountain wasn't just listening anymore. It had noticed me. It had noticed I'd come home. The keeper of silence. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the bell. Not the real sound, just the memory of it, echoing in the space between my thoughts and the dark. By the time dawn came, pale and gray through the window, I was already dressed. The village looked different in daylight, smaller, older. The fog had lifted enough to see the mountain clearly now, its peak wrapped in low clouds. The temple sat halfway up, barely visible through the trees. I could just make out the edge of the roof, the dark curve of tile against stone. I needed to go up there. I told myself it was practical. If I was going to stay here even for a few days, I needed to understand what was happening, why the bell was ringing, why no one would talk about it. But really, I just needed to see it for myself. The path to the temple started behind the old schoolhouse. I found it easily. My feet remembered the way even when my mind didn't. The stones were uneven, worn smooth by decades of footsteps. Moss grew thick in the cracks. The trees pressed close on both sides, their branches woven together overhead like fingers. It was colder here. The air tasted green and damp. I climbed for 20 minutes before I saw the gate. It stood at the top of a stone staircase, red paint faded to rust. 2 pillars, a crossbeam, no doors. Just an opening that marked the edge of something older than the village below. I stepped through and the sound of the forest changed, quieter, flatter, like the air had decided not to carry noise anymore. The courtyard was small, paved with irregular stones. A bronze basin sat near the entrance, filled with rainwater. On the other side, the main hall rose up dark wood, sloped roof, windows covered with paper screens. And beyond that, barely visible through the mist, the bell tower. Incense smoke drifted from somewhere inside the hall, thin and steady. I could smell it from where I stood. Sandalwood, maybe cedar. Someone had lit it recently. You came. I turned. A man stood near the basin. I hadn't heard him approach. He was older than me by at least 30 years, thin and slightly stooped. His eyes were pale, filmed over with something that looked like fog trapped beneath glass. He wore simple clothes, dark pants, a faded jacket. His hands hung at his sides, fingers stained with ash. "I'm the caretaker," he said. His voice was soft, careful. "You're Haney's granddaughter." I nodded. "I heard the bell last night." He didn't react, just looked at me with those clouded eyes, his head tilted slightly to one side, listening. Not to me, to something else. "Everyone heard it," he said finally. "Why did it ring?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he stepped closer, stopping just at the edge of the courtyard. His gaze drifted past me toward the bell tower. "There's only one rule here," he said. "Never answer it." "Answer what?" "The bell." He paused. "When it rings at night, you don't go to it. You don't call back. You don't open your door." I waited for him to explain. He didn't. "What happens if you do?" I asked. His expression didn't change. "No one who's answered has come back to say." The words settled between us like stones dropped into water. I wanted to ask more, but something about the way he stood, so still, so focused on that faraway sound I couldn't hear, made me stop. Instead, I looked past him toward the bell tower. That's when I saw them. Footprints, fresh ones, pressed into the damp moss that covered the stones between the courtyard and the tower. They led in a straight line, clear and deliberate. Small feet, barefoot, maybe. They went all the way to the base of the tower steps. And then they stopped. No prints coming back. I stepped forward. Who was here? The caretaker followed my gaze. His jaw tightened. "No one," he said quietly. "No one's been here. But the footprints." "No one," he repeated. His voice was firmer now, final. I stared at the marks in the moss. They were real. I could see the shape of toes, the press of a heel. Someone had walked here, recently, within the last few hours. "You should go," the caretaker said. He wasn't looking at me anymore. His head was turned slightly, like he was listening again. "It's not safe to stay." "Why not?" He didn't answer. He just walked past me, slow and deliberate, toward the main hall. His footsteps made no sound on the stone. Before he disappeared inside, he stopped and glanced back. "The bell rings when it wants something," he said. "Don't let it want you." Then he was gone. I stood there alone, the incense smoke curling around me, the mountain pressing down from above. The footprints hadn't moved. They were still there, leading nowhere, stopping at nothing. I wanted to follow them. I wanted to climb those steps and see what was inside the tower. But I didn't. Not yet. That night, I locked every door in my grandmother's house. I checked the windows twice. I pulled the curtain shut. I sat in the main room with the lights off, waiting. The bell rang at midnight. One long note, deep and hollow just like before. It rolled down the mountain and settled over the village like a weight. I pressed my hands against my knees and told myself not to move. The second ring came a minute later, and then, beneath it, so faint I almost missed it, I heard something else. A voice, soft, pleading, almost human. It called my name. What the bell remembers, I found the storehouse by accident. It sat behind my grandmother's property, half hidden by overgrown bamboo and wild grass. I'd been looking for the old well, the one she used to draw water from before the village got plumbing, when I noticed the roof, sagging tile, rotted beams. A door held shut by a rusted chain. The chain broke easily, too easily, like it had been waiting. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of old paper. Light came through gaps in the walls, thin beams cutting through the dark. Wooden crates lined the floor. Shelves sagged under the weight of boxes and bundles wrapped in cloth. Everything looked abandoned, forgotten, but not empty. I found the ledger on the second shelf, tucked between two stacks of folded fabric. It was bound in dark leather, the corners worn smooth, no title on the cover, just a book that felt heavier than it should. I brought it to the window and opened it. The first page was dated 63 years ago, October. The handwriting was neat, precise, a list of names, 15 of them, each one followed by a date and a single word, missing. I turned the page, more names. Different handwriting, this time shakier, less careful. Some of the dates had been scratched out and rewritten. Others were circled in thick black ink. Notes filled the margins, cramped and urgent. Do not let them near the bell. The fire did not take them, it kept them. Seal it before the seventh night. I kept reading. The next section was written by someone else. The script was loose, frantic, whole sentences crossed out. Words underlined so hard the pen had torn through the paper. We heard them calling. We thought they were alive. The bell rang and we answered. It was a mistake. My hands started to shake. I flipped forward, scanning the pages. More names, more dates. Some entries were just a few words. Others went on for paragraphs, spiraling into desperation. And then I found the fire. It had happened in the winter. A cold night. The temple caught first. No one knew how. The flames spread fast, too fast, climbing the bell tower before anyone could stop them. 15 people had been inside. Monks, villagers, children. None of them made it out. But the next morning, when they searched the ruins, they found no bodies, just ash. And the bell had survived, untouched, unmelted, hanging in the tower as if nothing had happened. Someone had written in the margin, "It took them, it keeps them." Another hand had added, "The bell was never meant to summon, it was meant to contain." I closed the book. My chest felt tight, my throat dry. I looked around the storehouse, at the boxes and crates stacked against the walls. How much of this was my grandmother's? How much had she known? The mountain groaned. I looked up. The sound came from outside, low and deep, like wood bending under weight. The walls shuddered. Dust fell from the rafters in slow gray streams. It didn't look like dust, it looked like ash. I stepped back. The air had changed. Colder now, sharper. I could taste it on my tongue, bitter, burnt. I grabbed the ledger and left. That night, I didn't wait for the bell. I sat in the main room with every light on, the ledger open on the table in front of me. I read every entry, every name, every warning. By the time midnight came, I knew what the bell was. Not a marker, not a boundary, a prison. The first ring came at 12. I stood up. The second ring followed, deeper than before, vibrating through the floorboards. I pressed my hands against the table to steady myself. The third ring split the air, and then I heard it. A voice, clear, close, coming from just outside the window. "Sweetheart." I froze. It was my mother's voice, soft, warm, the way she used to sound when I was small, when she'd call me in from playing too late in the yard. "Come here, sweetheart, I've been waiting." I stepped toward the window. My hand reached for the curtain, then I stopped. My mother had been dead for 10 years. The bell rang again, a different voice now, younger, familiar. "Hey, it's me. I need your help." Kenji, my childhood friend. The one I used to climb the mountain with. The one who drowned in the river when we were 12. "Please, I'm scared. I don't know where I am." My throat tightened. I wanted to answer. I wanted to open the door and find him standing there, alive, waiting for me like he used to, but I didn't move. The bell rang a 5th time, and then I heard my own voice, "Let me in." It came from the other side of the door, calm, even, exactly the way I sounded when I was trying not to panic. "It's cold out here. I don't want to be alone." I stared at the door. My voice continued, "Please, I know you're scared, but it's just me. Open the door." I backed away. The bell kept ringing, over and over. The voices layered on top of each other. My mother, Kenji, myself calling, pleading, demanding. And beneath it all, I heard footsteps. Someone walking, not inside the house, outside, on the street. I went to the window and pulled the curtain back just enough to see. A figure move through the fog, slow, steady, heading toward the mountain path. I couldn't see their face, but I knew they were going to the temple. They were answering the call. I ran to the door and yanked it open. "Stop!" The figure didn't turn. They kept walking, their steps even and sure, disappearing into the mist. I stepped onto the porch. The bell rang again, so close now it felt like it was inside my head. I looked up toward the mountain. The temple glowed faintly through the trees. The bell tower stood dark against the sky, its shape sharp and still. And I knew, without thinking, without questioning, that the caretaker was gone, that the bell was ringing for anyone who would listen, that it didn't stop when he touched it. It welcomed you. Midnight crossing. The path to the temple was darker than I remembered. No moon, no stars, just the fog and the faint glow from above, pulling me forward like a thread I couldn't let go of. My legs moved without thinking. One step, another. The stones beneath my feet were slick with moisture, but I didn't slip. I couldn't turn back. The bell had stopped ringing, but I could still feel it, a hum in my chest, a pressure behind my eyes. It was waiting for me now. I knew that. The same way I knew my grandmother had climbed this path before she died. The same way I knew my mother had too. The gate appeared through the mist. I passed beneath it without stopping. The courtyard was different at night. The stones looked darker, older. The basin near the entrance had no reflection, just black water, still as glass. The incense smoke was gone, but the smell remained, clinging to the air like something burned and never cleared away. Lanterns hung from the eaves of the main hall. Their light flickered, soft and uneven, though I saw no flame inside, just light, moving on its own. I crossed a courtyard. The bell tower stood ahead, tall and narrow, its base wrapped in shadow. The steps leading up were steep, worn smooth in the center where countless feet had climbed before me. I put my hand on the railing. It was cold, colder than the air. I started to climb. Each step was heavier than the last, not physically, something else, a weight that pressed down from the inside. My chest tightened. My breath came shallow. Memories rose up without warning, sharp and vivid. My mother's funeral, the way I hadn't cried. Kenji's empty seat at school the week after he drowned. My grandmother's last letter, the one I never answered. I kept climbing. The tower hummed around me. I could feel it in the wood, in the stone, vibrating through my bones, a sound just below hearing, a frequency that matched the rhythm of my heartbeat. I reached the top. The bell hung in the center of the room, suspended from thick beams by a chain that looked too thin to hold it. It was larger than I expected, taller than me. The metal was dark, almost black, its surface covered in markings I didn't recognize. Characters, maybe, or something older. It swayed. Not much, just a slow, gentle movement, back and forth like something breathing. There was no wind. I stepped closer. The air around the bell felt different, thicker, heavier, like walking through water. I could see my breath now, white clouds forming in front of my face. The temperature had dropped. My fingers were numb. And then I saw them. Shapes forming in the shadows at the edges of the room. People. They stood in a loose circle around the bell, their faces turned toward it. Some I recognized. Others were strangers. All of them were still, silent, their eyes open but unseeing. I saw the woman from the street, the one who had bowed toward the temple. She stood near the back, her hands still pressed together. I saw the figure I'd watched disappear into the fog. A young man, his face blank, his lips moving without sound, and I saw the caretaker. He stood closest to the bell, his clouded eyes fixed on the metal. His hands hung at his sides, fingers curled slightly, as if he'd been reaching for something and stopped halfway. He didn't look afraid. He looked calm, peaceful even, finally at rest. I wanted to call out to him, to shake him, to ask what happened. But I already knew. The bell didn't summon the living. It answered the grieving. It called to the ones who couldn't let go, the ones who carried guilt like stones in their pockets, the ones who left things unfinished, unsaid, unresolved. It offered them what they wanted most: reunion, closure, an end to the ache. But the price was simple. To answer was to stay. The bell swayed again, and I heard it. Not a sound. A voice. My grandmother's. I knew you'd come. I turned. She stood behind me just at the edge of the light. She looked the way I remembered her, small, thin, her hair pulled back tight. Her eyes were the same, dark, sharp. Seeing everything. You left, she said. Her voice was soft, but there was no anger in it. Just fact. You didn't come back. Not when your mother died. Not when I wrote you. Not until I was already gone. My throat closed. I'm sorry, I whispered. I know. She stepped closer, her hand reached out, palm up, waiting. It's not too late, she said. You can stay now. We can stay together. No more leaving, no more silence. I looked at her hand. Behind her, the others stood in their circle, still and waiting. My mother was there now. I could see her at the edge of the light, her face soft and kind. Kenji stood beside her, young again, smiling the way he used to. They were all here. Everyone I'd lost, everyone I'd left behind. The bell hummed. I felt the pull of it, the promise, the end to everything that hurt. All I had to do was touch it. All I had to do was reach out. My hand moved, slowly. My fingers stretched toward the bell, and the metal seemed to shift, leaning closer, welcoming. The hum grew louder. My grandmother's hand stayed open. It's okay, she said. You can let go now. I closed my eyes. I thought of the ledger, the names, the dates, the warnings written in desperate hands. It was never meant to summon. It was meant to contain. The bell didn't free anyone. It trapped them. It kept them ringing over and over, calling out to the ones they loved, pulling them in one by one until there was no one left to grieve. I opened my eyes. My hand stopped, an inch from the metal. No, I said. My grandmother's face didn't change. You don't mean that. I do. I stepped back. The bell swayed harder now, the hum rising into a whine. The shadows around me shifted, pressing closer. My mother's face flickered. Kenji's smile faded. Please, my grandmother said, her voice cracked. Don't leave me again. I looked at her, really looked. She wasn't my grandmother, not anymore. She was what the bell had made her. A memory, a want, a grief that refused to rest. I'm sorry, I said again. And I turned away. The bell rang, once, loud, furious. The sound crashed through the room, shaking the floor beneath my feet. The shapes in the shadows screamed, silent, desperate, reaching for me. I ran, down the steps, through the courtyard, past the gate. The bell kept ringing, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The sound that remains. I didn't remember reaching the bottom of the mountain. One moment I was running, the temple behind me, the bell's fury shaking the air. The next, I was on the village road, my knees on the gravel, my palms pressed into the dirt. Blood welled up between my fingers, small cuts, shallow but stinging. I must have fallen, maybe more than once. I stayed there, breathing hard, waiting for my heart to slow. The sky was changing, gray edging into pale blue, dawn coming quietly like it wasn't sure it was welcome. The bell had stopped. I lifted my head and looked back toward the mountain. The temple was barely visible through the trees, just a dark shape against the slope. No glow, no movement. The fog was thinning, pulling back toward the peak. The mountain exhaled. I felt it in the air. A shift, a release. Like something held too long finally let go. I stood up slowly. My legs shook. My hands were filthy, streaked with dirt and blood. I wiped them on my pants and started walking. The village was waking. A door opened somewhere ahead. I heard footsteps, quiet and careful. A woman crossed the street carrying a bucket, her eyes down. She didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge me. But as she passed, her shoulders dropped. Just a little, like she'd been holding them tight and finally remembered she didn't have to. Another door opened. An old man stepped out, sweeping the entrance to his shop. He glanced up at the mountain, then back down at his broom. His movements were slow, deliberate, normal. No one spoke, no one asked. But I could feel it, the relief passing between them like a secret they all shared. The bell had rung. Someone had gone up, and now it was quiet again. For a while at least. I kept walking until I reached my grandmother's house. The gate was still open, the door unlocked. Inside, everything looked the same. The ledger sat on the table where I had left it, open to the page about the fire. I stood there for a long time, staring at the names, then I closed the book. I didn't take it with me. I carried it back to the storehouse, back to the shelf where I'd found it, and placed it exactly where it had been. The dust had already started to settle again, gray and soft. I stepped back and looked at the rows of boxes, the bundled cloth, the forgotten things my grandmother had kept hidden. Some stories didn't need to be finished. Some names didn't need to be corrected. The ledger would stay here, waiting for the next person who needed it. Or maybe it would sit undisturbed for another 60 years. Either way, it wasn't mine to carry. I left the storehouse and locked the chain behind me. I packed quickly. One bag, a few of my grandmother's things, a scarf, a small wooden box, a photograph of her and my mother when my mother was young. Nothing heavy, nothing that would slow me down. The bus came at noon. I stood at the edge of the valley, the same spot where I'd arrived 3 nights ago. The driver was the same too. He opened the doors without a word. I climbed on and found a seat near the back. As the bus pulled away, I looked out the window. The village grew smaller, the houses blurred together. The mountain rose up behind it all, silent and still, wrapped in clouds that looked like smoke. I thought about my grandmother, about my mother, about Kenji. The grief was still there. I could feel it in my chest, heavy and familiar. It hadn't gone away, it hadn't been resolved, but I was carrying it forward now, not leaving it behind, not letting it root me in place. That was the difference. The bell had wanted me to stay, to answer, to join the others in their endless waiting. But staying wasn't the same as healing, and answering wasn't the same as letting go. The road curved and the village disappeared behind the trees. I leaned my head against the window and closed my eyes, and then I heard it. Faint, distant, barely there. A sound like wind moving through hollow trees, low and mournful, almost human. I opened my eyes and looked back. The mountain stood quiet against the horizon. No movement, no light, just stone and sky. But the sound was still there, soft, persistent, following the road like a memory that couldn't quite fade. I turned away. Some calls were meant to fade, not be followed. Some grief was meant to be carried, not cured. The bus kept moving, and the sound grew quieter, thinner, until it was just the hum of the engine and the rattle of the wheels on the uneven road. I didn't look back again. The city felt too bright when I arrived, too loud, too full of people who didn't know what it was like to stand at the edge of something ancient and realize you had a choice. I found a small apartment near the station, unpacked my bag, hung the photograph of my grandmother and mother on the wall, placed the wooden box on the shelf. At night, I dreamed of the bell, not the sound, just the shape of it, dark and still, waiting. Sometimes I dreamed of my grandmother's hand, reaching out. Sometimes I dreamed of the footprints in the moss, leading nowhere. But I didn't go back. I wrote letters instead, to my mother, even though she was gone, to Kenji, to my grandmother. I didn't send them, I just wrote them, folding the paper and placing them in the wooden box one by one. It helped, not in the way the bell promised, not with reunion or closure or an end to the ache, but it helped me remember that grief wasn't something to fix, it was something to live with, to carry, to let exist alongside everything else. Years passed. I heard stories sometimes from travelers who passed through the village. The bell still rang, they said, not often, but sometimes on cold nights when the fog settled thick between the houses, and sometimes people still climbed the mountain. I didn't ask what happened to them. I already knew. On the anniversary of my grandmother's death, I went to the temple in the city, lit incense, bowed, whispered her name. The smoke rose thin and straight, disappearing into the air, and for the first time in a long time I felt something other than grief. Not peace, not forgiveness, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm, after the wind stops, after the last sound fades and the world remembers how to breathe again. I walked home slowly, my hands in my pockets, the city noise all around me. Somewhere far away, the mountain kept its secrets. The bell hung in its tower, dark and waiting. And I carried my grief forward, one step at a time, into a life that was mine to live.